First of all, Mrs. Blair, thank you very much for your timing that you've given us. And I wanted to start focusing on your project in Palestine, because most of our audience will be watching that. You know, you talked about the participation of women in the labor market in particular, and their income is pretty limited. And your project hoped to raise that. And I wanted to start by asking you what the major difficulties that you face in a place like Nablus, in the West Bank, working under occupation.
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be able to give this talk and actually to talk about what I think is a success story that we're talking about in Palestine. When my husband first became the Quartet envoy, I went over to the Middle East, right. And I was invited over to address a conference given by the Palestinian Businesswomen's Forum. And it was the first big conference they'd had where they invited people from abroad to come and speak. And about 100 or so businesswomen from Palestine turned up. And they had a day talking about various issues. And I opened it, and at the end I went back to find out what they decided. And they said to me then that they thought the thing that they really needed more than anything else was a place where they could go to get information, to get advice, to meet each other, and to build up a network and a support group for businesswomen in Palestine. And so I made them a promise that I would try and help them to do that. And thanks to Henriette Kolb and my foundation, we managed to do that. We opened a centre in Ramallah and then another centre with Tomorrow's Youth Organisation in Nablus. And I'm very pleased to say that both the centres have been great successes. Now, you asked me what the problems are for women. Well, in one way, of course, the problems that women doing business have in Palestine are the same as women doing problems across the Middle East. And they are the difficulties of being taken seriously. Sometimes for women it's even the difficulties of being allowed to work. The difficulties of raising finance. But obviously in Palestine there are, over and above that, the difficulties that don't just affect the women doing business in Palestine, but the men as well. And that is the difficulties of making sure that you can deliver your goods on time, that you can guarantee the chain of production. The difficulties that any state where there is still not peace and a secure framework for business has to operate in. So there are obviously particular problems in Palestine that are not so acute in other parts of the Middle East.
It's true, but in comparison, Palestinian women are considered liberated, if you wanted to compare with other women. And if you look at a place like Nablus, or maybe the villages around Nablus, you see this very resilient old women even who selling vegetables around the market, etc. So they have that sense of being entrepreneurial in their attitude, but they needed something that will allow them to reach the market. And your organization comes in here. So my question is, what kind of mechanism that you use to allow these people to have access to a market, to a competitive market even?
Well, you're absolutely right about the resilience of women in general, and the Palestinian women in particular. And I was very struck with that on my first visit to Nablus, because I was invited there to see what Tomorrow's Youth Organisation were doing. And at that time, they were working mainly with the children of the women in the refugee camps. And I went there and I met with two groups of women. I met firstly with the mothers of the children who were coming and using the facilities for play for the children. And when I spoke to them, they basically said to me, please help us do anything that will help feed our children, because the opportunities for us to actually be able to do what we want to do, which is to support our children, are very, very limited indeed. And the possibilities that they had for jobs in the past had all dried up. And so they were desperate to work, very willing to work, but didn't have anything to do. The second group I met was a group of young women who were just coming out of or just graduated from the university in Ramallah. And these were very articulate, very competent young women who'd got good grades in their business degree or whatever subject they'd chosen to study. And so I was very taken by their competence and said to them, what are you going to do next? And that is where the problem arose, because they said to me, one of them said to me, well, I'm thinking of learning embroidery, because that was the only thing she could think of that might be something that she could do. And she explained that whereas the boys that were